On the outskirts of San Bernardo, Nuevo León, the convent of the Holy Purification has remained closed to the public since 1873. Its windows are boarded up with heavy planks, and the grounds are surrounded by a 3-meter wall that the townspeople have raised higher and higher over the generations while teaching their children never to approach that place after nightfall. On the night of March 4th, 1873, 23 different people swore they heard the cry of a baby echoing as if from every corner of the town at once, while a light of an impossible blue poured from the convent windows for exactly 7 hours. 3 men who tried to approach and investigate were struck temporarily blind by the glow. What few people know is that both the ecclesiastical and civil authorities sealed every medical record of the nuns who lived there, concealing the true cause behind the collective hallucinations, the deformities in newborn children, and the mysterious deaths that continued for decades after the building was abandoned. Tonight, we will uncover the forbidden history of the baby of the convent of the Holy Purification and the invisible poison that has claimed more than 100 lives over the past century and a half. Before we begin this unsettling tale, I invite you to subscribe to this exclusive channel where we reveal the darkest secrets others dare not tell. Activate the bell so you don't miss any of our investigations, and let us know in the comments from which country you are listening to this chilling narration. This content is not for everyone, only for those brave enough to face the most uncomfortable truths in our history. San Bernardo was a prosperous mining town in the mountains of Nuevo León in the mid-19th century. Founded by Spanish settlers in 1721 around a silver mine, the settlement had grown to house about 400 souls, miners and their families, merchants, craftsmen, and of course, representatives of the church who guarded the community's morality and faith. The convent of the Holy Purification loomed from the top of a hill, 2 kilometers from the town center. It was built on the ruins of an old Spanish hacienda, which itself had been raised over an even older Huastec settlement. The convent was an imposing structure of gray stone, with a bell tower that seemed to scrape the sky. Its thick walls and narrow windows gave it the appearance of a fortress more than a house of prayer. 35 nuns lived within its walls, belonging to the order of Descalced Carmelites, known for their strict discipline and cloistered life. Yet unlike other convents, the Sisters of Holy Purification maintained an active bond with the community. They ran a small hospital, an orphanage, and a school for girls. Their work earned the gratitude and respect of the townspeople, though it did not entirely dispel the aura of mystery that surrounded the women who lived behind those centuries-old walls. The convent was ruled with a firm hand by the Mother Superior, Sister Catalina de la Cruz, who had led for 26 years. At 63, tall and slender, with dark eyes that seemed to pierce through appearances, she was rumored to sleep barely 3 hours a night, dedicating the rest of her time to prayer and contemplation. Her austerity was legendary, as was her knowledge of medicinal herbs and treatments for all manner of illnesses. Among the youngest novices was Lucia Mendoza, a 17-year-old girl who had joined the convent 6 months earlier. Unlike many others who entered for economic need or family imposition, Lucia had chosen religious life by vocation. Orphaned since the age of 12, she had been taken in by the parish priest of her hometown, who, impressed by her intelligence and devotion, recommended her to Sister Catalina. Lucia quickly adapted to convent life, standing out for her dedication to study and her skill in caring for the sick. But since her arrival, she had begun to experience strange symptoms, persistent headaches, fleeting visions in the shadows, and a peculiar tremor in her hands that came and went without explanation. She attributed these troubles to the rigors of monastic life and the high altitude, never daring to mention them for fear of being seen as weak or, worse, unfit for the religious path. What Lucia did not know was that her symptoms were not unique. Over the years, many novices had suffered the same after a few months in the convent. Most adjusted with time, but some developed far worse conditions: blindness, paralysis, madness. Those unfortunates were discreetly sent away to institutions in Monterrey or Mexico City, their fate wrapped in the same silence that shrouded all matters within the convent. Meanwhile, San Bernardo thrived on its silver mine and the trade it generated. Yet behind this apparent prosperity lurked a persistent, seldom spoken problem: the unusually high number of children born with deformities or neurological issues. These unlucky infants were often left at the convent's door, where the nuns would take them in without question. Most did not survive their first year. Those who did rarely developed normally. Mexico itself was living through times of upheaval. Independent for scarcely half a century, the country still struggled to establish stability after decades of internal and external conflict. The Church, having lost much of its political power due to the reform laws, clung tightly to its social and cultural influence, especially in rural areas. In that context, convents like the Holy Purification functioned as small fiefdoms, isolated islands of tradition in a sea of uncertainty. And no one in San Bernardo suspected that beneath the surface of their lives lay an invisible poison, one that had plagued generations and would manifest most dramatically on that cold March night of 1873, when a baby with impossibly blue eyes was abandoned at the convent door. The night of March 4th, 1873, began like any other at the convent of the Holy Purification. After the final prayer, the sisters retired to their cells, and silence fell heavy over the building. Only the whistle of the wind through the cracks of the windows and the occasional hoot of an owl disturbed the stillness. Lucia remained awake long after bedtime. The headaches that had tormented her for weeks grew worse that night, accompanied by a constant buzzing in her ears that made it impossible to sleep. Sitting on the edge of her narrow cot, she gazed at the full moon through her small window when an unexpected sound drew her attention. 3 sharp knocks echoed against the convent's main door. Strange, at such an hour. Visitors, even in cases of medical urgency, usually arrived before curfew. Driven by curiosity and by the chance to distract herself from her suffering, Lucia wrapped herself in a shawl and quietly slipped out of her cell. The convent's corridors were lit only by silver moonlight filtering through the narrow windows, casting long shadows across the stone walls. Lucia moved cautiously, knowing she would be in trouble if caught wandering at such an hour. When she reached the vestibule, she found Sister Magdalena, the 74-year-old gatekeeper, already there with a trembling oil lamp in her hand. The elderly nun hesitated, torn between waking the Mother Superior or opening the door. Who could it be at this hour? Lucia whispered, startling her. "My child, you frightened me," the old nun replied, pressing a hand to her chest. "You shouldn't be here." "I couldn't sleep, sister. I heard the knocks and—" Before Lucia could finish, the knocking came again, louder, more insistent. The 2 women exchanged a worried glance. "Perhaps someone needs medical help," suggested Lucia. Sister Magdalena crossed herself quickly, then pulled back the heavy bolt. She opened the door just a crack, enough to peer outside, but saw no one. Only the cold night air and the pale glow of the moon on the stone steps. "There's no one," the nun muttered, moving to close the door. But Lucia, peering over her shoulder, gasped. "Look, sister, on the step." There, wrapped in a dark red blanket, lay a baby. The bundle was so small it could easily have been mistaken for a heap of cloth. Sister Magdalena threw the door wide, and together the women stepped out. The baby was awake, startlingly calm for having been left in the freezing night. His eyes, an unearthly shade of blue, so clear they looked almost transparent in the moonlight, stared at them with an unsettling intensity, far too knowing for a newborn. "My God," murmured Sister Magdalena, making the sign of the cross. "Who would abandon a child on a night like this?" Lucia bent to lift the infant, noticing something strange. The blanket was bone-dry despite the heavy dew on the steps, and the child's skin burned with feverish warmth, almost unnaturally hot. "He's burning up," Lucia said, alarmed. "We must bring him inside." But as she carried the child back through the convent doors, a sudden stab of pain shot through her skull, so sharply she nearly dropped him. Her vision blurred, and for an instant she thought she saw the baby's skin glowing faintly blue. She blinked, and the vision vanished, but the pain remained. "Are you well, child?" Sister Magdalena asked, noticing her pallor. "Yes, it's just my headaches. They've been worse lately." The old nun nodded with weary understanding. "It is normal, at first. The water of these mountains affects some sisters more than others. In time, you'll grow used to it." Lucia wasn't so sure, but she said nothing. They carried the baby to the infirmary, a sparse but clean room in the east wing. Under brighter lamplight, they examined him more closely. A boy, only days old, apparently healthy save for his high temperature and the strange tremor in his tiny hands. Those eyes, however, icy blue, fixed unblinking on Lucia, filled her with unease. "We must tell the Mother Superior," Sister Magdalena said, moving toward the door. "Watch him until I return." The moment the old nun left, the room grew inexplicably colder. The lamplight wavered, casting restless shadows on the whitewashed walls. The baby, silent until then, began to cry. But it was no ordinary cry. It was a piercing, metallic wail that seemed to resonate inside Lucia's skull, amplifying her pain. She tried to soothe him, rocking him gently in her arms, but the cry only grew louder. Then the impossible happened. The sound no longer came from the infirmary alone. It multiplied, reverberating through the convent's halls, from behind closed doors, even from outside the building itself. Lucia's terror mounted as the lamps flared with a bluish glow, bathing the room in that same cold, unnatural light. Her headache exploded into agony, bringing with it fleeting visions, distorted faces of women she had never met but somehow recognized. Images of the hill where the convent now stood, but without any building. Only barren land where strange men dug into the earth. The cry spread across the convent, waking every nun, and, as later became known, every soul in the town of San Bernardo. That impossible sound seemed to come from everywhere at once, accompanied by a blue radiance pouring from each convent window, visible for miles around. When Mother Superior Catalina finally arrived at the infirmary with Sister Magdalena and several others, she found Lucia kneeling on the floor, clutching the baby to her chest, eyes glazed, blood running from her nose. The novice whispered incoherent words, as if entranced. The earth is poisoned. He knows. He can see it. The invisible poison." The Mother Superior seized the baby from her arms. At once, the crying stopped. The blue light began to fade. Lucia collapsed unconscious. "Take her to her cell," Sister Catalina ordered in a voice firm but strangely tense. "And no one, absolutely no one, will speak of what happened tonight. This baby does not exist. Do you understand?" The sisters nodded, too frightened to question. As they carried Lucia away, the Mother Superior studied the child. He was calm again, eerily so, his blue eyes now fixed on her. "You," the old woman murmured. "You are like the others, but different, more aware." Turning to Sister Magdalena, she commanded, "At dawn, send word to Monterrey. To Dr. Montero. Tell him it has happened again, but this time it is different." Left alone with the baby, Sister Catalina gazed at him with a mixture of awe and dread. "What are you really?" she whispered. "And why have you come to us now, after all these years?" The baby, of course, did not answer. But his eyes, those impossible eyes, seemed to hold knowledge far older than his fragile body. By the following morning, the entire town of San Bernardo was abuzz with rumors of the strange phenomenon. Some claimed it was a miracle, others insisted it was an omen of disaster. Many swore they had seen spectral figures moving through the glowing windows of the convent, though none could describe them clearly. 3 men who had dared to approach during the event awoke temporarily blind, their eyes red and streaming as though they had stared directly at the sun. Don Augusto Vega, the town physician educated in the capital, could find no explanation for their condition, which fortunately improved as the day went on. Inside the convent, Lucia did not awaken until midday. Her head throbbed with unbearable pain, and her memories of the night were fragmented. Visions of the baby, the impossible crying, the eerie blue light, and scenes she could not explain, as if from another life. When she tried to sit up, dizziness overwhelmed her. The sparse furnishings of her cell wavered and bent like reflections in rippling water. She shut her eyes, fighting nausea, and when she opened them again, Sister Juana, the convent's nurse, stood at her side holding a steaming cup. "Drink this," Juana said firmly, though her voice was kind. "It will help." Lucia obeyed, swallowing the bitter herbs used for migraines. As she drank, she noticed Sister Juana's hands trembling slightly, the same strange tremor she herself had suffered for weeks. "What happened to me last night?" Lucia asked after finishing. "You had an episode, nothing serious," Juana replied, avoiding her gaze. "Likely caused by exhaustion and lack of sleep." "And the baby?" "The one we found at the door." "There was no baby," Juana interrupted, unusually firm. "You were feverish, hallucinating. Sister Magdalena says she found you wandering the halls in a delirium." Lucia frowned, confused. She knew what she had seen, what she had held in her arms. It couldn't have been an illusion. But the crying, the blue light, the whole town saw it. "There was a storm last night," Juana said mechanically, as if repeating a learned phrase. "Lightning lit the convent strangely, and the wind in the trees can sound like lamentation. The townsfolk are superstitious. They exaggerate." Before Lucia could protest further, the door opened. Mother Superior Catalina entered. Juana withdrew with a bow, leaving them alone. Catalina studied her in silence for a moment before speaking. "How do you feel, my child?" "Confused," Lucia admitted. "Sister Juana says there was no baby, but I remember it. I held him in my arms." The Mother Superior sighed and sat on the edge of the bed. Up close, Lucia saw the deep shadows under her eyes, the pallor of her usually stern face. "The mind is fragile," Catalina said softly, "especially in a place like this. You are not the first novice to experience visions." "Visions?" Lucia repeated, unsettled. "This convent has a peculiar history," Catalina continued. "It was built on land considered sacred by the natives. Some say there is something in the air or the water that affects certain people strangely. Is that why so many sisters suffer from headaches and tremors?" Lucia asked, piecing it together. The Mother Superior raised her brows in surprise, as if not expecting the question. "You are perceptive," she said. "Yes, some are more predisposed. Usually the symptoms fade with time, as the body adjusts. And if they don't," Catalina smoothed the folds of her habit with a nervous gesture. "Rest today," she said, avoiding the question. "Tomorrow you may resume your duties if you feel well." She paused at the door, then added without turning back, "And Lucia, do not speak of your impressions from last night with the other sisters. It could cause unnecessary unease." When the door closed behind her, Lucia lay staring at the ceiling, where the shadows seemed to shift on their own. She was certain they were hiding something, something important, but she could not yet imagine what. That day passed in restless sleep, filled with broken dreams. Women in ancient habits writhing in convulsions, men digging beneath the burning sun, and a baby with eyes of liquid mercury crying silver tears. By evening, when the bells called the sisters to vespers, Lucia felt strong enough to rise. Against the instructions she had been given, she dressed and slipped from her cell, determined to find answers. The convent was unusually quiet, even for the hour of prayer. Lucia made her way to the infirmary, hoping to find some trace of the baby from the night before. But the room was spotless, neatly arranged, without a sign that it had been used. Puzzled, she pressed on, this time toward the convent library. The library was rarely visited except by the Mother Superior and a handful of senior sisters. Its shelves held mostly religious texts, though Lucia knew there were also records of the convent and the region. When she arrived, she found the door locked. Strange. She was about to turn away when she heard voices inside. She leaned close, holding her breath. "We cannot ignore the pattern, Doctor," came the voice of Sister Catalina. "This is the third case in less than a year. And this one is different." "Different how?" asked a man's voice that Lucia did not recognize. It had to be Dr. Montero, the one Catalina had mentioned the night before. "The child is older, perhaps a week, and his symptoms more pronounced. The eyes especially. I have never seen that shade of blue." And the novice who found him spoke of a glow. She raved about poisoned earth and other incoherencies. This morning she still remembered the child, though we told her it was a hallucination. She seems to have accepted it, for now. There was a pause, then the doctor's voice dropped. "We will have to watch her carefully. If she develops the more severe symptoms." "I know," Catalina interrupted, her tone grim. "Like the others." "Where is the child now?" Montero asked. "In the usual place," Catalina replied. "Sister Magdalena is watching him." Lucia's heart pounded. The usual place? She darted back as footsteps approached the door. When it opened, Catalina emerged with a tall, thin man in dark clothes carrying a medical case. Lucia shrank into the shadows of a column until they passed. Only then did she move, driven by a curiosity stronger than her fear of discovery. She made her way to the oldest part of the convent, where disused storerooms and cellars lay. The usual place, the words echoed in her mind. She remembered the whispered rumors among the novices about a special room where gravely ill sisters were taken before being sent away to hospitals in the city. After nearly an hour of searching, Lucia found a small door hidden behind a faded tapestry in a seldom-used corridor. Its lock was old and weak. With a hairpin, she managed to pry it open. The room beyond was dimly lit by a single oil lamp. In the center stood a crude cradle, and beside it, Sister Magdalena dozed in a rocking chair. Lucia crept forward. Wrapped in the same red blanket, the baby lay inside, sleeping. His tiny hands twitched in that same strange tremor. "I knew it wasn't a hallucination," Lucia whispered. Her voice, though soft, woke the old nun. Magdalena startled, then gasped when she saw her. "Lucia? You must not be here. Why did you lie to me?" Lucia demanded, ignoring her alarm. "Why deny the baby's existence?" The old nun's face twisted with fear, torn between running to summon the Mother Superior and her clear affection for Lucia. Finally, she spoke, her voice trembling. "It is not what you think. We did it for your sake, for all of ours." "Protecting us from what?" Lucia pressed, stepping closer to the cradle. "What is it they don't want me to know?" At that moment, the baby opened his eyes. That same impossible blue fixed on Lucia with piercing intensity. And as before, pain lanced through her skull, followed by a torrent of visions. Abandoned mines, streams of polluted water, women stricken with symptoms like hers, but far more advanced. "The poisoned earth," Lucia whispered, repeating what she had muttered in her delirium. "It's the water, isn't it? Something in the water." Sister Magdalena stared at her with fear and resignation. "You were always too clever for your own good," she said sadly. "Just like her." "Like who?" Lucia asked. The nun hesitated, then answered in a low voice. "Isabel Quiroga, your mother." The revelation struck Lucia like a blow. She had always believed she was an orphan, told that her parents had died in an accident when she was 12. That was the story the parish priest had repeated when he took her in. "My mother," she whispered, her breath shallow. "But they told me my parents were dead, that I had no family." Sister Magdalena sighed, as if releasing a secret long carried, both relief and dread in her eyes. "Isabel did not die. She grew terribly ill, as many women here do after long years in the convent. When her symptoms worsened, they sent her to a sanatorium in Monterey. None expected her to survive, but she did. Then why didn't she come back for me? Lucia asked, her voice breaking between pain and hope. They forbade her to return, the nun said bitterly. The church declared her unstable after she tried to alert the authorities to what she had discovered here. What had she discovered? Magdalena glanced nervously at the door before lowering her voice. The true cause of the sickness. It is not divine punishment, nor cursed air as the superstitious believe. It is something in the earth itself, a poison that seeps into the water. As the old nun spoke, Lucia felt pieces falling into place. The headaches, the tremors, the visions. Mercury, Lucia murmured, recalling the fragments of images she had seen when she touched the baby. It's Mercury, isn't it? From the old mines. Magdalena's eyes widened. How do you know that? I saw it. Or I think I saw it, Lucia replied, pointing to the baby, who still stared at her with unblinking blue eyes. When I touched him, I saw things. Memories that aren't mine. The nun's expression softened with sorrow. Just like Isabel. She too had visions. She claimed the convent was built on a fault in the earth that released toxic vapors, that the well water carried mercury from the abandoned shafts. And it's true. Lucia pressed. Dr. Montero confirmed it years ago, Magdalena admitted. But by then the church had invested too much. The convent, the hospital, the school, everything would collapse if the truth came out. So they buried it. And the children? Lucia asked, her gaze shifting back to the infant in the cradle. Why are there so many abandoned like him? Because their mothers drank the poisoned water during pregnancy, Magdalena explained, her voice heavy with grief. Some are born with visible deformities, others with hidden damage that shows later. Out of shame or despair, the families leave them here. And what does the convent do with them? The nun lowered her eyes, unable to meet Lucia's. The most afflicted don't survive long. The others are sent to institutions, places where no one asks questions. The baby stirred then, as if sensing the weight of their words. His trembling grew stronger, his eyes gleaming brighter under the lamplight. This one is different, Magdalena whispered, her voice tinged with awe and fear. I have never seen a child react like this. It is as if he understands. Who are his parents? Lucia asked. No one knows for certain. He appeared at the door like so many others. But in the town they whisper about a woman who lived near the abandoned mines, a woman who drank water straight from a spring inside the shaft. Lucia reached for the baby's tiny hand. The moment she touched him, visions returned, clearer than before. She saw a dark-haired woman drinking from a stream that shimmered unnaturally, the same woman later giving birth alone in a crumbling hut, and finally stumbling through the night to the convent doors with the baby in her arms. She brought him here on purpose, Lucia gasped, pulling back. She wanted him to be found, to serve as proof. Magdalena's face paled. You should not touch him like that. These visions are dangerous for you. You already show signs of poisoning. Poisoning, Lucia whispered. Do you mean I too am poisoned with mercury, like my mother? We all are, to some degree, Magdalena admitted with resignation. Some more than others. It depends on one's sensitivity and the time of exposure. The sound of footsteps in the corridor made both Lucia and Sister Magdalena stiffen. A moment later, the hidden door creaked open, and Dr. Montero stepped inside, followed closely by Mother Superior Catalina. For an instant, silence froze the room. Montero's sharp eyes darted to Lucia, then to the cradle. His face darkened. What is she doing here? He demanded. Magdalena rose shakily from her chair. It was my fault. I left the door unguarded. She came in while I... Enough, Catalina interrupted, her tone colder than steel. She advanced toward Lucia, who instinctively placed herself between the cradle and the Mother Superior. I had to know the truth, Lucia said, her voice trembling but resolute. You've hidden it from us for too long. The sickness, the poisoned water, the children. Why? Catalina's eyes narrowed. You do not understand the weight of these matters. The church cannot afford panic, nor scandal. If the truth were to spread, San Bernardo would collapse. Do you want to see the mine closed, hundreds thrown into poverty, families starving? They are already suffering. Lucia shot back. How many women crippled? How many children abandoned? You call this protection, but it is silence, silence that kills. Dr. Montero stepped forward, his voice calm, but edged with menace. You are clever, girl. Too clever. Just like your mother. Lucia's heart pounded. You knew her? I studied her case, he replied with a thin smile. She too imagined she could fight the system. She paid dearly for that mistake. What did you do to her? Lucia whispered. Montero shrugged. Nothing beyond what was necessary. She was relocated, placed under observation. She lives still, though her mind wanders far from reason. A chill ran through Lucia. Magdalena's lips pressed tight, but she said nothing. Catalina turned her gaze to the cradle. This child must be removed before others start asking questions. He cannot remain here. No, Lucia cried, clutching the edge of the cradle. He is proof, living proof of what you've tried to hide. Proof of nothing, Montero countered coldly. An infant born sickly, like countless others. Easily explained away. But if people believe otherwise, chaos will follow. Catalina placed a hand on the cradle's edge, her expression torn between authority and unease as the baby stirred and opened his unearthly blue eyes. For the first time, the Mother Superior faltered. He looks at me as if he knows, she murmured. Montero's tone hardened. Then it is settled. At dawn, I will take him to Monterey. He will be placed where no one will ever see him again. Lucia's chest tightened. She could not allow it. Every instinct told her that the baby was more than just another victim, that he carried the truth inside him, a truth that could not be erased. And for the first time, she felt the stirring of defiance stronger than her fear. That night, Lucia lay awake in her narrow cell, heart pounding, replaying the words of Dr. Montero. At dawn he would take the baby away, and she knew what that meant. The child would vanish forever, just like the others. The thought filled her with rage and dread in equal measure. She had always believed her calling was to serve God through obedience. But now she saw that obedience had been twisted into complicity. The convent she once revered had become a cage of silence, a place where truth was buried along with the sick. She could not allow the same fate to claim the infant with the piercing blue eyes. As the hours crawled by, she formed a plan. When the convent bells rang for matins before sunrise, most of the sisters would be in the chapel. That would leave the usual place unguarded. She would slip in, take the baby, and flee into the mountains. From there, she could reach the road to Monterey and find someone willing to listen, perhaps even the authorities. But fear not at her. Could she really survive outside the convent walls, with no money, no allies, and a sickly newborn in her arms? Could she truly defy the Mother Superior? She remembered Sister Magdalena's sorrowful eyes, her whispered warnings. The old nun had risked much to tell her the truth. Perhaps she would help again. When the bell finally tolled, Lucia rose, wrapped herself in her cloak, and crept into the shadows of the silent corridors. The chapel echoed with the voices of the sisters in prayer, their chants muffled by thick stone. Lucia moved in the opposite direction, toward the hidden door. Her hands trembled as she pushed it open. Inside, the cradle still stood, and the baby lay within, awake, as though expecting her. His strange blue gaze met hers, and the instant she touched him a new wave of visions overwhelmed her. Rivers turned black with mercury, miners coughing blood, children with hollow eyes crying in silence. And over it all, a voice, her mother's voice, whispering, "Do not let them bury the truth." Tears blurred Lucia's vision. She lifted the baby into her arms, swaddling him tightly in the crimson blanket. "I won't," she promised. "I will not let them take you." A creak behind her made her start. Sister Magdalena stood in the doorway, a lamp in her hand. For a moment, the two women stared at each other. "You know what you are doing?" Magdalena asked quietly. Lucia hesitated, then nodded. "If I stay silent, I am no better than them." The old nun closed her eyes, as if in prayer. When she opened them again, they shone with a mix of pride and sorrow. "Then go. Quickly. Through the orchard gate. The lock is weak. It will take them hours to realize which way you went." Lucia's throat tightened. "Why are you helping me?" "Because once, long ago, I failed your mother," Magdalena whispered. "I will not fail you." Without another word, she stepped aside, holding the lamp high to light Lucia's way. Cradling the baby against her chest, Lucia slipped into the cold night air, her breath misting in the darkness. The mountains loomed ahead, jagged and shadowed, their paths uncertain. But she felt a fire within her stronger than fear. For the first time in her life, she was free, not just of the convent walls, but of the silence that had bound generations. And with the child in her arms, she swore she would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. That night, Lucia lay awake in her narrow cell, heart pounding, replaying the words of Dr. Montero. At dawn he would take the baby away, and she knew what that meant. The child would vanish forever, just like the others. The thought filled her with rage and dread in equal measure. She had always believed her calling was to serve God through obedience. But now she saw that obedience had been twisted into complicity. The convent she once revered had become a cage of silence, a place where truth was buried along with the sick. She could not allow the same fate to claim the infant with the piercing blue eyes. As the hours crawled by, she formed a plan. When the convent bells rang for matins before sunrise, most of the sisters would be in the chapel. That would leave the usual place unguarded. She would slip in, take the baby, and flee into the mountains. From there, she could reach the road to Monterey and find someone willing to listen, perhaps even the authorities. But fear gnawed at her. Could she really survive outside the convent walls, with no money, no allies, and a sickly newborn in her arms? Could she truly defy the Mother Superior? She remembered Sister Magdalena's sorrowful eyes, her whispered warnings. The old nun had risked much to tell her the truth. Perhaps she would help again. When the bell finally tolled, Lucia rose, wrapped herself in her cloak, and crept into the shadows of the silent corridors. The chapel echoed with the voices of the sisters in prayer, their chants muffled by thick stone. Lucia moved in the opposite direction, toward the hidden door. Her hands trembled as she pushed it open. Inside, the cradle still stood, and the baby lay within, awake, as though expecting her. His strange blue gaze met hers, and the instant she touched him a new wave of visions overwhelmed her. Rivers turned black with mercury, miners coughing blood, children with hollow eyes crying in silence. And over it all, a voice, her mother's voice, whispering, "Do not let them bury the truth." Tears blurred Lucia's vision. She lifted the baby into her arms, swaddling him tightly in the crimson blanket. "I won't," she promised. "I will not let them take you." A creak behind her made her start. Sister Magdalena stood in the doorway, a lamp in her hand. For a moment, the two women stared at each other. "You know what you are doing?" Magdalena asked quietly. Lucia hesitated, then nodded. "If I stay silent, I am no better than them." The old nun closed her eyes, as if in prayer. When she opened them again, they shone with a mix of pride and sorrow. "Then go. Quickly. Through the orchard gate. The lock is weak. It will take them hours to realize which way you went." Lucia's throat tightened. "Why are you helping me?" "Because once, long ago, I failed your mother," Magdalena whispered. "I will not fail you." Without another word, she stepped aside, holding the lamp high to light Lucia's way. Cradling the baby against her chest, Lucia slipped into the cold night air, her breath misting in the darkness. The mountains loomed ahead, jagged and shadowed, their paths uncertain. but she felt a fire within her stronger than fear. For the first time in her life, she was free, not just of the convent walls, but of the silence that had bound generations. And with the child in her arms, she swore she would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Inside the abandoned mine, the silence was suffocating. The air pressed heavy in Lucia's lungs, thick with the metallic tang of mercury that seemed to seep from the very walls. Each breath burned her throat, but she dared not leave while the searchers prowled nearby. The baby shifted uneasily in her arms. His tiny hands trembled with greater force now, and Lucia felt heat radiating from his small body. His strange blue eyes shone brighter in the darkness, reflecting like shards of glass. Then the visions came. At first, faint flickers, shadows on stone, like memories caught in the rock itself. But as she gazed deeper into the mine's depths, the flickers sharpened into scenes. She saw miners hacking at the earth with pickaxes, their faces smeared with sweat and mercury dust. She saw them drinking from streams that glowed faintly silver, unaware of the poison coursing through their veins. The images shifted. Women doubled over in pain, coughing blood, their hands trembling uncontrollably. Infants born with hollow eyes, their cries sharp and metallic like the one she had heard the night before. And over it all, the relentless sound of digging, as if the earth itself cried out in torment. Lucia staggered back against the wall, clutching the baby tighter. "Stop," she whispered. "Please, stop." But the visions only grew stronger. Now she saw herself, her own reflection, older, gaunt, her hands trembling just like the others. Behind her stood a woman she recognized from Magdalena's story, Isabel Quiroga, her mother. Her eyes were wild, yet full of determination. "Do not let them silence you." The vision of Isabel spoke, though her lips barely moved. This child is the key. Through him, the truth will be seen. Tears streamed down Lucia's face. "Mother, are you real, or am I just poison like the rest?" But the vision gave no answer. Instead, it faded into darkness, leaving only the faint glow of the baby's eyes. Suddenly, a sharp crack split the silence. A beam above her shifted, releasing a shower of dust. The mine was unstable. One wrong move could bury them alive. Lucia tightened her grip on the infant, whispering a prayer. "If this is where we die, at least let it be with the truth." But the baby did not cry. Instead, he reached one trembling hand toward the darkness of the tunnel, as though guiding her deeper. Lucia hesitated. Going farther inside meant greater danger from collapse and poison. Yet something in the child's gaze urged her forward. With unsteady steps, she followed the baby's silent command, moving deeper into the mine where shadows grew thicker, and the truth, perhaps, awaited. The deeper Lucia ventured into the mine, the heavier the air became. Each breath seared her lungs, and her legs trembled from exhaustion. Yet the baby remained awake and alert in her arms, his unearthly eyes fixed on the path ahead, as if he alone knew the way. The tunnel twisted and narrowed until at last it opened into a vast chamber. Moonlight seeped faintly through cracks in the rock above, glinting off pools of stagnant water that shimmered with a strange, silvery sheen. The sight filled Lucia with dread. This was no ordinary water. She knelt beside one of the pools and dipped her fingers. The liquid clung to her skin like quicksilver, leaving behind a metallic gleam. The poison, the invisible curse that had plagued San Bernardo for generations. Her head throbbed violently, and vision struck again. She saw Spaniards 3 centuries earlier, digging greedily into the earth, discovering veins of silver entwined with liquid mercury. They rejoiced at their fortune, using the mercury to refine their ores, never caring where the waste flowed. She saw streams blackened with runoff, fields ruined, wells tainted. The images shifted, natives sickened and dying, their cries ignored by the colonists. Then nuns arriving, building their convent above the poisoned veins, believing they were sanctifying cursed ground. But their prayers could not cleanse the earth. They only brought more victims within reach of the hidden poison. Lucia collapsed to her knees, gasping. All this time, it wasn't God, or curses, or demons. It was us, humans. Greed. The baby stirred, letting out a soft sound that was not quite a cry, more like a note, pure and resonant, echoing through the chamber. The pools of mercury-tainted water rippled as though responding. And in that sound, Lucia felt a terrifying certainty. This child was more than a victim. He was a mirror, reflecting the truth of the land, the poison, the suffering. He bore within him the memory of centuries, and through him the truth would not stay buried. A sudden noise broke her trance, the crunch of footsteps on stone. Lantern lights spilled into the chamber. "They're here," Lucia whispered, clutching the baby tighter. Dr. Montero's voice rang out, sharp and commanding. "Lucia, you cannot hide forever. The mine will kill you before we do. Hand over the child, and I may still spare you." Lucia backed toward the far wall, her heart pounding. The baby's eyes glowed brighter than ever, casting a faint blue halo around them. For the first time, Lucia felt no fear, only resolve. "You will never bury this truth again," she whispered. The shadows of her pursuers stretched longer across the poisoned ground, closing in on her. The lantern light grew brighter as Montero and two men descended into the chamber. Behind them, Sister Catalina followed, her face pale in the unsteady glow. The glimmer of mercury from the pools reflected in her eyes, making them seem almost haunted. "Enough of this madness," Montero barked. His voice echoed off the stone, harsh and commanding. "Give me the child, Lucia. You cannot change what has been buried for centuries." Lucia clutched the infant to her chest, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. "You're wrong. The truth is here, in the earth, in the water, in him. You've known all along, and you've let people die." Catalina stepped forward, raising a hand as though to calm both sides. Her expression wavered between authority and despair. "Lucia, you don't understand. If this truth spreads, San Bernardo will fall into ruin. Families will lose everything. Faith itself will crumble. Faith built on lies is already ruined," Lucia answered. Montero sneered. "You think anyone will believe a trembling novice and a half-dead infant? You are already poisoned. Your visions are delirium, nothing more." As he spoke, the baby let out a sharp, piercing cry. The sound reverberated through the chamber, amplifying against the stone until it became unbearable. The pools of mercury quivered violently, sending ripples of cold light across the walls. The men with Montero staggered, clutching their ears. Catalina fell to her knees, whispering prayers. Lucia herself felt the cry inside her bones, shaking her very soul. But in that vibration came clarity, a wave of visions so powerful she nearly collapsed. She saw the future, the mines collapsing, the poisoned waters spreading farther, generations yet unborn bearing the curse. Unless the truth was revealed, the suffering would never end. When her sight cleared, she saw Montero advancing, one hand reaching for the child. His face twisted in fury. "He will not be your salvation. He is nothing but a defect, a symptom to be erased." "No," Lucia whispered. Then louder, with a strength she did not know she possessed. "He is the voice of the earth itself." As Montero lunged, Lucia stepped back onto unstable ground. The rotten beams overhead cracked. With a thunderous roar, part of the ceiling gave way. Rock and dust cascaded down, separating Lucia and the baby from their pursuers. The chamber filled with choking debris. Lucia shielded the infant with her body, coughing, struggling to breathe. When the dust cleared enough to see, the passage behind her was blocked by tons of stone. Montero's furious shouts echoed faintly from the other side, but he could not reach them. Lucia staggered deeper into the chamber, guided only by the faint glow in the baby's eyes. The mine groaned around her, as though the earth itself had decided to seal away its secrets. Catalina's voice carried faintly through the rubble, full of anguish. "Lucia, come back. Don't let the child drag you into damnation." But Lucia pressed on, whispering to the infant, "Not damnation, revelation." The walls trembled again, and a fissure opened ahead, letting in a shaft of cold night air. With her last strength, Lucia pushed forward, stepping into the darkness beyond as the mine collapsed behind her. Lucia stumbled out of the fissure into the cold mountain night. Behind her, the mine gave a final groan and collapsed in on itself, sealing away Montero and his men on the other side. Dust rose into the moonlight like a ghostly veil, and then silence returned. Exhausted, bleeding from cuts and half-choked by the fumes, she pressed on. The baby was still in her arms, his blue eyes glowing faintly, guiding her steps down the slope. Every muscle in her body screamed for rest, but she knew stopping meant death. By dawn, she reached a remote shepherd's hut. An old man found her collapsed at his threshold, barely conscious. Seeing the child, he took them in without question. For days, Lucia lingered between life and death, fevered and poisoned by the mine's air. Yet she survived, though never fully free of the tremors and visions that had haunted her since entering the convent. What became of the baby is less certain. Some say Lucia carried him to Monterey and placed him in the care of reformists who sought to expose the truth of San Bernardo's poisoned earth. Others whisper that the child died soon after, and that Lucia buried him in secret among the mountains. But in San Bernardo, the legend took on a life of its own. The townspeople spoke of a night when blue light poured from the convent windows and the cry of a child echoed through every street. Some swore that even now, on certain nights, the same metallic wail can be heard in the hills, carried on the wind. The convent of the Holy Purification was closed that same year, officially for structural instability. Its windows were boarded, its walls raised higher, and the townsfolk warned their children never to approach. Yet behind the silence lingered the unspoken memory of mercury-tainted water, of women struck with illness, of infants abandoned. As for Lucia, her name was erased from the convent records. No novice by that name was ever listed, according to official history. But among the elders of the region, whispers endure of a young nun who defied her order to protect a child unlike any other. And they say that in her final years, when Lucia wandered the mountains half-blind from sickness, she was never truly alone. A boy with impossible blue eyes walked beside her, his hand small in hers, as if guiding her path. Perhaps he was real, perhaps only the echo of her visions. But either way, the story remains. The child abandoned at the convent door, the poisoned earth of San Bernardo, and the novice who dared to uncover the truth. A truth that still haunts the mountains of Nuevo León to this very day.